Arya and Catherine met, what would have happened between the two of them?
Yeah, I don't think either of them would be particularly fond of the other. Yeah, it'd be an interesting meeting.
There is the truth. My mind is... But there is always another truth that lives behind it.
She's not safe.
In a previous version of a script, Maisie auditioned for a different character, a character that ended up being cut. It's a character that would enter in 1955, so around the time that Christian Dior hires Yves Saint Laurent, a character that worked for Monsieur Dior and then befriends Yves Saint Laurent. I saw her audition. I didn't put it together that it was Maisie. And I thought, yeah, that may be why. The role of Catherine took on more prominence as the storytelling changed. And I immediately thought of, there was only one person.
Something that we spoke about a lot was just trying to find the woman behind this title that we know now as Miss Dior, and her being associated with this perfume and a muse of the brand.
Monsieur Dior, what do you desire?
To design the most beautiful women's clothing that ever existed.
There was this incredible book called Miss Dior, which is by Justine Picardy, which really researches Catherine's life, and between that and the incredible scripts, yeah, that was my Bible. You just start to look at her, you know, in her early 20s, her relationship with Christian and the way that she really just like saw him. They're kind of one of the only members of his family who he could really let his guard down around. Finding that connection and that relationship between myself and Ben and making that like real and alive and kind of a driving force for both of our stories in lots of ways. That was kind of the key into, yeah, her like place within this story. She understood the responsibility that came with being part of the resistance. The driving force for a lot of that time in her life is to protect the people that she feels would do the same in her situation.
There's so many nuances of what happens with Catherine, because when she's arrested, tortured to give up names, she doesn't name anyone. Clearly, having stayed at her brother Christian Dior's apartment, if she had given up that name or where she was living or names of her other resistance fighters, they all would have been arrested and most likely killed. In that moment, you're asking yourself, what would you do? There are many superheroes in the world without capes, even today. Researching her specific story was a way to understand much more of the world, and now reflected back on what the world is happening today.
These women who were in the camps together, they had nothing but to be able to bond with one another and like hold each other through that. The way that Helen directed those scenes, it was like big long takes and huge like camera moves around the whole set, and these dogs barking. After my head was shaved, it's not in the show, but Helen said, okay, now stand her up and throw her over there. So the girl, Celine, who was cutting my hair, she stood me up and she pushed me, and I turned around and there was just a bunch of girls who all had shaved heads, and I obviously at that point knew my head was the same, and it was sort of confronted with that I like felt very emotional and had a little cry. Then we cut and we went to lunch, so it was like, yeah. But yeah, I think it's just that sense of community in those like really dark times that I felt I really tried to cling to.
And I'm assuming you only have one take to do that, because you can't
you can't grow it back, yeah. Just when I think about my own relationship with like patriotism and my own country, I've felt a lot of times kind of just like let down by a lot of the things that I've learned. For me, I think when I feel most patriotic is when I'm watching sports. And so that was really my ticket in. And in 2012, we had the Olympics in the UK. It was such an amazing time and such a formative like part of my life as well. And I'd work a lot with an accent coach, and we would talk a lot about Catherine's patriotism. And so it was just something that I felt I wanted to drum up, yeah, in particular scenes and particular moments. I was like walking on a treadmill, sweating, watching the opening ceremony for about 4 hours before work one day. It was a bizarre experience, and yeah.
The opening ceremony?
Exactly,
20,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. That was, yeah, it was an interesting time. I mean, luckily the opening ceremony is about 3 hours long, so.
The Spice Girls are in it.
Exactly.
You're on vacation in Paris. What would you say is the best thing of living in Paris and the worst thing of living in Paris?
For me, the best thing of living in Paris is the beauty of the city and the people. Being able to make a series about French people experiencing life in Paris is invaluable. One of the worst things of being in Paris is not being able to be in Paris because I live in New York. So every time I come back wanting to spend more time in Paris.
The best thing about living and working in Paris is definitely, I guess, the culture around, like, I feel like Paris nights are very long, the mornings are very slow, and I kind of like that change of pace in the culture here. And I would say the worst thing, I don't think I really have one. Well, during that summer, the worst part was just the heat wave, but you know, that's global warming, it's not Paris's fault.
It's time to show the world what you've created.